does that mean that God doesn't want us to be rich? Right? Does God want us to be rich? Does God want us, is God okay with riches and wealth? And the answer is, well, let's take a look at some examples. The first example is Abraham. Abraham, the father of faith. Genesis chapter 13, verse 2 says, Abraham had become very wealthy in livestock and in silver and gold. Okay? So very wealthy, even Abraham, the father of faith. Who else? Job. Job was already rich. Everything was taken away. Then what did God do? In Job chapter 42, verse 10, it says, after Job had prayed for his friends, the Lord restored his fortunes and gave him twice as much as he had before. Twice as much. What about King Solomon? He was the richest ever in the history of the world. 2 Chronicles chapter 9, verse 22 says, King Solomon was greater in riches and wisdom than all the other kings in the world. So first, when you look at this, what are we seeing? It's like, no. God doesn't look down on riches. Even many of his followers were very rich, and Solomon being the richest ever in the history of all mankind, Solomon was the richest. So we look at this, we're like, okay, so it's not like God is going against wealth and riches. However, some people will bring these verses up to me. And this is a very famous verse. It's Matthew chapter 19, verse 24. It says, again, I tell you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of God. Okay? So it's like, how easy for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God? Well, you see that needle and that eye, it's easier for a camel to go through. What? That basically says it's impossible. Another verse in Matthew chapter 6, verse 24, where Jesus says, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. All right? So here's the thing. What does that mean? Well, God allows people to be rich, but also he says it's impossible for a rich person to, wait, this doesn't make any sense. Well, what is God really saying? And the first thing I want you to think about is this. There is temptation when it comes to money. However, what are you being tempted by? What is money? Money is paper. It is not living. Money doesn't look at you and say, hey, buddy, come, because I am money. Come and get me now. Like, it's kind of like you don't have this sexy piece of paper that's looking at you trying to tempt you into getting the money. The money can't even talk. Money can't be like, hey, buddy, come and get the money. None of that. Money is inanimate, right? It doesn't move. It doesn't talk. It doesn't have feelings. How does money tempt you? And the answer is in James chapter 1, verse 14 and 15. And guess what James chapter 1, verse 14, 15 says? But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. Then, after desire is conceived, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. What is James saying here? Temptation comes from your own desires. When you didn't look at YouTube, when you didn't look at TikTok and seeing all these people eating the best things, you're not thinking about, can I eat the best food? You're okay with McDonald's. You're okay with eating at a regular place. But only when you start seeing all these other different things, you start saying to yourself, oh, I want that too. And what happens? Your own desire begins to tempt you into getting more money, finding another way. Where does temptation come from, guys? It's from you. It's your own hearts. It's not the money itself. It's you. Which means that when it comes to wealth and riches, does God despise it? Absolutely not. But the key point is, are you ready for it? Are you ready for wealth and riches? Because what's the point of giving something to someone you love if they cannot handle it? And it ends up making them go into the domain of death. It leads them on a path to hell. What's the point? God will give to us as we are ready for. And if we're not ready for it, why would God want to give it to you in the first? Think about if you had children, would you give them something that could kill them if they're not ready for it? Absolutely not. That's why if your 6-year-old comes to you and says, Daddy, I want to get married, you'd be like, hell no. No way. You're 10 years old. Dad, buy me a car. You're not going to buy a 10-year-old a car. It makes no sense because you know that they're not ready for it, right? In the same way, too, I would say the number one thing that matters, and we already read this verse in Matthew chapter 6, verse 33, what is the most important thing when it comes to wealth and riches in your life? Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and then everything else will be added onto it, which means that your priority is the most important part. If your priority is God first above everything else, then why would God worry about giving you riches if it's all God, only God? I only think about God's my number one priority. The biggest thing you have to think about right now is if God is your priority or not. And that's going to be the biggest determination of whether God will entrust you with riches or not. Why did God entrust Solomon with the greatest riches? Because he asked for the greatest thing. He did 1,000 burnt sacrifices, and when God said, I'll give you anything, he didn't ask for riches. He didn't ask for wealth. He didn't ask for fame. He said, give me wisdom to rule. And God's like, that guy is ready. He'll handle his riches well.